It's good to have quiet sections if they go and witness a noisy rock band. Then there are the dynamics of your entrance and subsequent great power. Glenn Raymond Tipton, a name linked with thunderous riffs, fiery solos, and one of the sharpest brains in heavy metal. He and Judas Priest have transformed the stage into a battlefield where music was their weapon, and every riff had the ability to shake a whole generation for more than 4 decades. Fate, however, always finds a method to challenge the greats. Glenn Tipton was pushed into the largest fight of his life as Judas Priest kept ruling the globe. A fight with no stage lights, no screaming fans, just himself against Parkinson's disease, a quiet foe gradually robbing him of his capacity to make music every day. From a blues-loving child in Blackheath to a heavy metal legend, from the time he had to leave the stage to ageless classics like Breaking the Law and Painkiller, Glenn Tipton's story is one of triumph, sadness, and an unrelenting will that will not die. But how did Glenn Tipton's life start before he became the guy who formed Judas Priest, and before he confronted his biggest foe? Let's return to the beginning, to the genesis of a heavy metal legend. The beginning, Glenn Raymond Tipton was just a typical kid, growing up in Blackheath, Staffordshire, England, before he became one of the best guitarists in heavy metal. No one could have foreseen that this shy adolescent would one day control Judas Priest's destiny and profoundly influence the rock music scene. Born into a family with a great love of music on October 25, 1947 in Blackheath, Staffordshire, England, Glenn Raymond Tipton, though he would eventually become a famed heavy metal guitarist, in his early years Glenn showed little interest towards such strong, electrifying music. The first sounds he was exposed to were gentle, classical piano melodies played by his mother, not roaring electric guitars or bombastic riffs. Glenn's mother was a pianist who greatly shaped his musical tastes. She often performed at home, surrounding Glenn with soft harmonies, and allowing him to understand music theory far earlier than most other kids. He was not an especially lively or vocal youngster. Rather, he was quiet and reflective, seeking comfort in music, a universe where he could freely investigate his feelings. Glenn started studying the piano under his mother's direction. He revealed innate ability, and soon became proficient on the instrument, yet the piano never really grabbed him even with his skill. He could admire its beauty, but thought something was lacking, a feeling of freedom, a strong vitality, the piano keys just couldn't offer. Turning point arrived when his elder brother, Gary Tipton, brought home an electric guitar. From the first touch of Glenn on the strings, the pure electric sound captivated him, something the piano had never given him. Gary taught Glenn his first chords, but unlike many guitar prodigies, Glenn did not pick it up right away. Months of fretboard battle and note wrangling preceded his ability to correctly control the instrument. But Glenn stayed tenacious and resolute rather than becoming disheartened. These traits would subsequently characterize his playing style, not depending on pure speed, but emphasizing accuracy, emotion, and fluidity. Growing up amid the golden age of rock and roll, with artists like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the Who ruling the scene, Glenn cultivated a profound love for the blues instead. Prioritizing the feeling in each note over showy methods, he spent hours listening to and practicing, along with musicians, including Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, and Peter Green of Fleetwood Mac. Not only a pastime but also a necessary component of his existence, music became to be, but rather a genuine enthusiasm. Glenn worked as a machinist, a vocation demanding accuracy and patience, before completely devoting himself to a career in music. But no matter what he did, he could never get away from his guitar. Every free minute he spent practicing, playing in tiny pubs, and looking for a chance to make his love into a profession. Then, by chance, he met someone who changed his life. One that would send a blues-loving young guy into the realm of heavy metal, and alter it for all time. First job. Glenn Tipton realized after finding his passion for the guitar, that music was more than a pastime. He was destined for it. Still, it was not always simple to become a heavy metal legend. Prior to becoming the musical genius of Judas Priest, Glenn spent years battling, trying out many approaches, and perfecting the guitar methods that would eventually shape a whole generation. Glenn Tipton started his professional career in the early 1970s with the Flying Hat Band, a hard rock band inspired by Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. Glenn's stage persona, guitar technique, and knowledge of the music business were all shaped during this time. a characteristic quality Glenn would later bring to Judas Priest. The band concentrated on complicated riffs and long solos. His innate ability and unflagging commitment allowed the Flying Hat Band even the chance to open for Deep Purple, one of the best rock bands of that time. This opportunity let Glenn study under guitar greats, including Ritchie Blackmore. But the Flying Hat Band never took off even with their promise. They never published any albums, and ended up disbanding without landing a significant record contract. For many artists, an early setback would have signaled the end of a dream. Glenn Tipton, however, was not one to quit. When one door shut, another larger and far better opened. Judas Priest was getting ready to record their first album, Rock-a-Rolla, in 1974, but was still looking for a definite musical path. Back then, though they had no unique sound, the band was inspired by progressive rock and blues rock. Glenn Tipton showed up at just the right time to help them confirm their sound, by providing them with a second guitarist. From the time he joined, Glenn offered a new viewpoint, sharper melodies, creative writing, and excellent technique. But maybe the most important thing he brought was his dynamic collaboration with K.K. Downing, a wonderful fit for Judas Priest. While Downing preferred a raw, aggressive, and wild playing style, Tipton offered melodic accuracy, depth, and structure. They rapidly created, together, one of the best twin guitar duos in heavy metal history, a combination never before attempted quite like this. Though Rock-a-Rolla wasn't a financial success, the band finally found the sound they wanted to chase. The Judas Priests had officially begun the most vital stage of their trip, one that would change the face of heavy metal. A long path still remained ahead, though, before they could rule the globe. Though this was merely the start of a storied, brilliant career, Glenn Tipton had entered the band that would define his whole career. Joining Judas Priest in 1974, Glenn Tipton was not simply another new member. He was the driving force behind the band's musical change and conversion into one of the most lasting heavy metal icons. Judas Priest was still playing around with progressive rock and blues rock in their early years, but Tipton's entrance pushed them into a new age marked by razor-sharp riffs, fiery songs, and an unrelenting attitude. The album Sad Wings of Destiny made clear Tipton's first significant contribution to Judas Priest, 1776. From Rock-a-Rolla, this was a significant advance. It presented darker, more forceful and emotionally charged works. Especially on songs like Victim of Changes and The Ripper, Tipton was instrumental in both songwriting and guitar performance. His playing style matched K.K. Downing exactly to create a balance between technical accuracy and unrestrained ferocity, something that would later define Judas Priest. Judas Priest moved from a hard rock band into a full-fledged heavy metal juggernaut, and this chemistry kept evolving through Stained Class, 1978, and Hellbent for Leather, 1979. Judas Priest invented a cleaner, sharper, more aggressive sound even as rock music at the time still had significant blues influences. Songs such as Exciter become basic speed metal building blocks. By this point, Tipton was not just an outstanding guitarist, but also a prolific lyricist, significantly influencing the band's path. The album that confirmed Judas Priest as a powerful force in heavy metal was British Steel, 1980, the greatest turning point. Not only did songs like Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight dominate charts, they also changed the face of heavy metal. Studs, leather jackets, motorcycles, and a rebellious but measured look. Tipton showed he was not just a technical guitar genius, but also a songwriter, able to create straightforward yet powerful tunes, driving Judas Priest to worldwide fame. With Glenn Tipton at the center, the 1980s were the golden age of Judas Priest. From Screaming for Vengeance, 1982, featuring Electric Eye and You've Got Another Thing Coming, every album pushed artistic limits and offered an unrelenting heavy metal sound to defenders of the faith. 1984, Tipton kept honing his guitar techniques throughout this period, blending speed, accuracy, and emotion to produce some of the most famous solos in metal history. Success, nevertheless, came with difficulties as well. 1990, Judas Priest was sued in one of the most strange cases in musical history. Families of two teens, James Vance and Raymond Belknap, who tried suicide after reportedly being affected by Stained Class, 1978, sued the band. The family said the song Better by You Better Than Me had hidden pro-suicide overtones. Over the months-long trial, Tipton and the band had to fight unfounded charges. In response to the claims, Tipton famously replied, "If we could control our fans' brains, we'd rather advise them to buy more albums." In the end, Judas Priest was found not guilty, but the case tainted their reputation in an undesirable way. Judas Priest climbed to new heights with Painkiller, 1990 after this issue. This record was their fastest and most intense peak, with searing solos that set every stage alight and lightning-fast chords. Painkiller was an all-out burst of shredding, tapping and fast riffing, if Tipton's earlier style kept melodic and bluesy qualities. The record also connected Judas Priest to the next generation of metal artists, motivating guitarists such as Dimebag Darrell, Pantera, Zakk Wylde, and Sinister Gates, Avenged Sevenfold. But a significant surprise came just as Judas Priest peaked. In 1992, Rob Halford departed the group. This put Judas Priest in a tight spot as internal conflicts started to escalate. Glenn Tipton and KK Downing fought to keep the band afloat all over the 1990s, with Tim "Ripper" Owens taking over for Halford. Judas Priest was unable to recover their previous splendor, despite their best attempts, and Tipton and Downing's conflicts grew. KK Downing denounced Tipton publicly for too much band control. Downing suggested in his autobiography, Heavy Duty, Days and Nights in Judas Priest, that Tipton had more say over band choices than even Rob Halford or the management. The band appeared to restore stability when Halford came back in 2003, but the split between Tipton and Downing never completely mended. By then Tipton had already established himself as a living legend. Still, he kept pushing artistic limits, and wrote songs like Judas Rising to show that Judas Priest still had great influence. His love of heavy metal stayed unshaken even with age, as shown in Nostradamus, 2000. In Ambitious Idea album, KK Downing left Judas Priest in 2011, blaming Tipton and the band's management for fostering a poisonous workplace. Though Downing's final departure was a clear sign that Judas Priest was no longer the same, Glenn Tipton never publicly responded to these charges. Though his body started to betray him, Glenn Tipton's lifelong goal had been to make Judas Priest a legendary force in metal. The question persisted: could he still go on when his unrelenting will clashed with his bodily weakness? Parkinson's disease struggle, while Judas Priest kept up their unrelenting march through the heavy metal scene. Glenn Tipton found himself battling a new war playing out inside his own body. Glenn stayed as committed as ever. By the 2010 ses, writing, playing, and giving his all on stage as the band started a new phase with Redeemer of Souls 2014. But something seemed wrong. His formerly flowing hands started to let him down.